So thank you all for coming. I've been a seeker, I'd say much of my life. I remember as a college student, I got this idea that it didn't matter what subject I studied. I just want the best teachers at my college. So I just asked around who are the very best teachers of anything. I just really wanted the best teachers. And I had some great subjects all over the place with some of the best teachers. It was a great experience. But I think I've been a seeker since I was a young man. And I think it's been both an inside seeking and an outside seeking. I've certainly looked for classes and learning experience and education. I've been a seeker in the area of relationships, looking for the right relationship and looking for the right work and the right faith community. So I think I've been looking externally, but also I've been looking internally and maybe seeking some inner qualities that I was finding hard to come by. Perhaps peace might be one of those qualities, healing, even a sense of safety at times, seeking a real depth of trust. So I've been seeking both in the world externally and interiorly. And about 25 years ago, three different sources kind of converged to really help me in this seeking. And the first was nonviolent communication, developed by Marshall Rosenberg. And nonviolent communication really opened up two things for me. The first is the nonviolent communication practice groups opened were just very accepting spaces. When I discovered nonviolent communication in its little communities, I discovered a deep quality of acceptance. Everyone who showed up could just be who they are. And that was beautiful. But then I was invited to be aware of my needs and to affirm my needs and to see them as actually having a life, a force, an energy to them that can be trusted and actually that can guide me. And that was a new relationship with my needs. So nonviolent communication and the people of nonviolent communication became crucial to me. Somatic experiencing is a second stream, and that really taught me to trust my body and to pay attention. It gave me a practice of paying attention to what's going on at the cellular level, at the nervous system level. And Ignatian discernment. I've been exposed, I think, since college to this man, St. Ignatius from 500 years ago, who was a seeker himself, I'd say, and particularly this Ignatian spirituality and its practices associated with discerning the good, discerning the best, discerning where's life really leading me? What does God really want for me? So those three streams were really important to my seeking, and they've all come together for this tool. What I wanted to introduce here, we'll just go to the next slide. I already gave you that question. Here's the roadmap. I want to first talk about these three or four interrelated hungers and how I see them at work inside me and perhaps inside all of us. And I think this tool for discernment that I've developed and want to share really is responsive to these interrelated hungers. So I want to name the hunger that I think gave birth to this tool. And again, I don't know if I've said their names, but I want to give credit. The originator of something called the Nonviolent Communication Dance Floors is Gina Laurie and Bridget Belgrave. I believe they're in Great Britain, and they developed 20 plus 30 years ago, maybe, these dance floors for nonviolent communication. And that's first what gave me the idea. And I used their dance floors, but then it kept morphing and changing. And pretty soon it became something I felt like was my own. So, but that is the origin of this tool. So I want to first talk about these interrelated hungers, say a little bit more about the sources of the seven steps, because each source has its own inner map. You could think of these seven steps toward clarity as a map of the inner life. And there are multiple maps, different sources have different maps of what's going on inside us. What is the inner life? So I'll name the three maps from the three sources, and then you'll see a little bit how they come together to form the seven steps as a cohesive map of the inner life. We'll get a chance to practice and reflect on practice. You get a chance to answer questions, and I'll say a little bit more about the 4-week journey. So that's where we're going just in the next 45 minutes or so. So here's these three interrelated hungers, or four, depending if you combine the first two or not. And I certainly see this inside me, but I see these inside many. I think as a young person, my antenna was often oriented out. I was attuned to what was going on around me. Right. We all are attuned. Animals are attuned. Everyone's attuned. But I think My outer connection was more attuned than even my inner connection. I think I paid more attention to my environment, maybe wanting to be safe, maybe wanting to make sure people were happy. But I don't think I cultivated the quality of self connection that in those developmental years is really needed as you reach adulthood. And so this hunger for self connection persisted inside me. And I think there's a lot of us who are hungering for this really deep and beautiful and nurturing and compassionate and loving connection with ourselves. So I think that's a really strong hunger in our culture. And we could talk more some other time about how have we been uprooted from our self connection? I mean, shouldn't it be a natural thing? I think our culture is very much prioritizes the rational and the head. And so I think we often are encouraged to live from here up. And that disconnects us with so much of our life. So the first hunger is self connection. And that's deeply related to source connection. There's different words that we have for our source. In Hans Kum's great tome of a book, Does God Exist? He tries to come up with a definition for God that could be widely accepted, even without a religion. And he comes up with three definitions or three different ways of naming a God that he believes exists. And he says, well, there's a source, there's a force, and there's an end of the course. And so I think the source is one word we could use for God. Some people might use spirit. Some people might use creator. But there's this deep connection for something that's perhaps both transcended and more closer to us than we are to ourselves. I think this image speaks to that. I love this image of the tree here. It suggests that if I'm really connected to myself, I'm grounded, I'm rooted deeply in myself, deeply in my own heart. But if you look at this tree, there's a heart within the heart. And perhaps that's true for us, that there's a center within the center. There's a heart within the heart. There is a source, a spirit, a living life force. And not just for the humans, but perhaps for all creatures. Perhaps it's simply life with a capital L. So that's the second hunger. There's this hunger we have for source, hunger for self connection, hunger for source connection. The third hunger I want to name is just that I make good choices. I prayed that 2 nights ago at a gathering of Benedictine oblates. My only prayer was that I make good life-serving choices. I want to make life-serving choices. And then the monk who was with us said, well, that's a prayer for all of us. May we all make life-serving choices. So I was affirming to hear that. I think we just want to make choices that serve our needs, serve the needs of others, serve life. So we just want to make good choices. Everybody, from the littlest child to the oldest adult. And every day faces us with multiple choices. Some of them are big, some small. But this tool is responsive to the hunger of making good choices, making choices that really serve life. And then the fourth hunger I want to name is bearing fruit. Perhaps as I'm aging and life keeps moving on and I've got more in the rear view mirror than in my front for sure. I want to make sure I'm generative. I want my life to generate. I want to make my life, do my best to have my life bear fruit. And I think we all want to be fruitful with our lives. We all want a life that bears good fruit. So, and all those hungers are related. And I think, again, this image might get at that relationship. If we're connected to our source and our roots, to the great heart that lives within the heart, then that source connection and self connection flows up through us like nutrients and water flow up through the tree. And it leads to choices and actions, just the same the way the tree is constantly making, perhaps involuntarily, beautiful choices to turn its leaves towards the sun, to send buds at the right time, when to drop the leaves from the tree. So we're choosing when to prune, when to grow, which way to turn. But if we're connected, then the life-serving choices flow. And then the last thing happens, we bear fruit in good time, in the right season. And the beautiful thing about this image is it's bearing the fruit of love, if you will. It's because it's rooted in love, it's bearing the fruit of love. So those are the hungers that I'm hoping the 7 steps toward clarity responds to. So let's talk a little bit briefly about these maps of the inner life. If you study nonviolent communication, you hear pretty quickly about the 4 components. And you often hear people say OFNR, OFNR, OFNR. So that's observations, feelings, needs, and requests, four basic components of nonviolent communication. Um, and Marshall distinguishes observations with evaluations. So in nonviolent communication, observations are as if things are being captured by a video and audio, and it's exactly as it's being recorded. Whoever see it could see the exact same thing. It's observable facts, observable reality, less room for disagreement. Whereas evaluations are our interpretations of reality, our judgments of reality, our thoughts about reality. Those are the contrast to observations. Feelings, Marshall often contrasts again with thoughts. And it's such a powerful thing in connecting to our inner life to distinguish our thoughts and our feelings. Needs, Marshall distinguishes, and I say Marshall, Dr. Marshall Rosenberg, the psychologist who developed nonviolent communication, who synthesized so much and brought it together in nonviolent communication. Needs, Marshall suggests, and this is very important, that there's a common set of needs in all human beings. And some of those are survival needs, like we need air, we need water, we need food. And some of those are what we need to thrive. But there's this common set of needs that we all share. And for Rosenberg's NVC, needs are the heart. I would say needs and needs awareness is the heart of nonviolent communication. And I think once you understand that nonviolent communication has a heart, has a center, I think it all comes together. I think sometimes when I watch NVC practiced or spoken about, it seems like it doesn't have a center. And I think it does. And I think needs are at the center of nonviolent communication because they're at the center of us. They're the motivating force of all action. And that's a pretty big deal. If we can identify and name that there's a motivating force within us of all action. And lastly, requests is when we ask for what we need. So that's a quick inner map of nonviolent communications components there. Somatic experiencing is the second source, if you will. And whereas nonviolent communication has OFNR, somatic experiencing has SIBAM. So if you've ever heard SEP, a somatic experiencing practitioner, they'll talk about SIBAM. And so when a somatic experiencing practitioner is with a client, they're often helping them track SIBAM, which is tracking their inner life. Sensations, physical sensations. This is an important piece that is, I believe, Peter Levine and somatic experiencing adds to NVC, tracking physical sensations. Images for Levine can mean a couple different things. They often are synonymous with observations. It's the images that we see, but he sometimes adds impressions to images, which for me then would add evaluations with observations. But that's how images is for Levine. Behavior is often those small, subtle movements or gestures, which could be physical sensations. Affect is a synonym for feeling, and meaning, I would say, is the sense making that we make out of our experience, which I would call thought then. So that's a quickie of the inner life according to somatic experiencing. What Levine is missing, what SE is missing, I would say, is needs. That's the missing piece in the SE model, I'd say. Ignatian spirituality, the spirituality of the founder of the Jesuits, St. Ignatius, affect is so central. And by affect, feelings. So same. And Ignatius talks a lot about paying attention to our feelings, and he puts them in two broad categories, the same way Marshall puts feelings into two broad categories. Marshall says feelings we have when our needs are met, feelings we have when our needs are not met. Ignatius says, notice feelings of consolation, I feel console, or desolation, no consolation. And that was a real great indicator. So Ignatius really affirmed the importance of feelings in paying attention to our inner life. Ignatius doesn't use the language of needs, but he does use the language of heart's desires, which I use synonymously. For me, heart's desires is the same as needs, the thriving needs, not the survival needs, but all of the thriving needs. For Ignatian, part of the inner activity of the human, a natural activity of humans, is to pray. So prayer is an essential element for Ignatian's components. And then lastly, Ignatius really affirms the will, that humans have will, we have choice. And I think it's valuable to name will as an element of the inner life, that we could have a sense as to what God might be calling us to do, but we might hesitate to do it. And Ignatius affirmed that there's a quality of will that is at work, and he would encourage his directees to surrender, if you can, to whatever it is you sense God is calling you to. But there's will, choice, and then the surrender is assent to the Spirit's activity. So that's a brief little intro to the components in Ignatian spirituality. So now let's introduce the 7 steps. So these are the 7 steps as I've named them. And I want to say, welcome, Christella. I'm glad you're here. You're getting here at a perfect time. We are recording. And these are the 7 steps toward clarity rather than for clarity, I would say. The first is thoughts. And I often put thoughts first because you could start there. You could start with a mind going a mile a minute. You could start with all your judgments, all your evaluations, as what Marsha would say, the jackal show. All the nippy comments you have towards yourself or towards other. That's a fine place to start. The second step is observations. And observations are distinct from thoughts. So already one thing this tool does is it helps us make distinctions between our thoughts and observable reality. And that's a beautiful gift for me because I can hold my thoughts more lightly. All of a sudden I can realize, oh, that's just a thought. Oh, I'm telling myself a story then, rather than that's a fact. And I'll just point out this picture on the screen here. I'm so thankful for the woman gave us permission to use this picture. This is a woman in a correctional facility in Philadelphia a few years ago. And we're using the 7 steps. I don't know if you can see them on the floor. And this woman who I'm accompanying I was just so moved. She just had a loss in her family and she couldn't be with anyone. Obviously, she was incarcerated. She was not allowed to be out. And so she was processing that experience. It was just a beautiful moment. And this is just an example of using the 7 steps. And while I'm pointing to this example and while I'm going through the steps, I am going to say first, second, third. But I want to make clear that the 7 steps do have a linear quality and a circular quality. So they're not meant to just go 1 to 7 and that's it. You could start anywhere on the 7 steps and you could move up and down in any direction. So there is this fluidness, but there is a sense that it's moving in a certain direction at the same time. I'd say it's both and. So we've introduced thoughts, introduced observations. Next is feelings, which also is called affect. So we're connecting with, all right, as I observe this situation, as I think this thought, how do I feel? And then feelings are indicators of the state of our needs. That's what Marshall teaches us, a great insight. So what need is being indicated by my feeling? And you see, I'm using needs and heart's desire synonymously. What's the heart desire that's alive in this situation? And then physical sensations is important because it can hold 2 things. It could just hold whatever's going on in the body in the moment, being with that. Or the second thing it could hold is what is the living energy of the need? So step 5, physical sensation, is very much related to step 4, needs. Once I land on needs, and here, let me get up for a second. I don't know if you can see my feet or me, but I'm standing on needs right here, right? So here I am, and this is meant to be mobile. So the 7 steps are meant to go back and forth, to be in our body. So it's an embodied discernment process. So if I'm on the need for respect, you say, if that's what I land on, oh, that was really what was up in the situation for me. I needed respect. What I do is, that's a powerful need for me. At once, and I slide over to physical sensation. I go, how does respect live in me? And this is a practice of the living energy of needs, practice of connecting with the beauty of needs. So this 5th step, if you will, is so important because it connects us not as much with our head, but with what's going on in our body around the need for respect. And we really take our time. With each of these steps, we take our time, but particularly here because for many of us, we're so disconnected from this living energy of our needs. It's a practice that needs to be cultivated. And this tool will help us cultivate it. So you just stay here and you allow with physical sensation of respect. And then you might report what's going on. I feel myself quieting as I get in touch with the need for respect. Almost a little smile coming across my face. I feel about the straightness in my spinal column. I feel my feet really connected to my shoes and the ground. There's a straightness in my whole body. Yeah, and with respectness comes a straightness, a standing, a sense of firmness. But not a tight firmness, it's a loose firmness, almost a firmness and solidness that makes me want to smile. I notice my breath. I notice my arms dangling loosely at my sides. And that's a little bit of connecting to the physical sensation that's connected to the need. And then only then I find, only then, if I take that fifth step of connecting to the living energy of the need, can I take the sixth step? Can I move to the requests of the heart and prayer? And this is maybe this is also unfamiliar, I think, to a lot of us. It was unfamiliar to me. But the more I just stayed with the living energy of the need, the more I realized it had wisdom. So the more I stayed with the living energy of requests, the more I and just listened to it and listened to my body, it started to give me a sense of direction given the particular observations. It's always situational. It's always in context. The 7 steps toward clarity are always contextual. So my heart started making requests of me, and I started developing a prayer. And my prayer basically sounds like this: Heart that longs for respect, is there anything I can do for you? And it's a beautiful prayer of me, the human person, coming to my heart with its longings and needs and desires, wanting to be its servant, wanting to put my will, my life at the servant of my own heart and its deepest desires, which is very different than serving my head and my thinking. So many of my choices have been thought driven. We may live in a thought driven culture, and I make such different choices when they're heart driven, and maybe even heart with a capital H. So I want to come to my heart, quieted perhaps, grounded through this process, to a place of prayer where I come open to be directed and given some guidance. And I don't have to have any guidance. It could just be dwelling in the beauty of the need. That could be enough. But often when I do get a sense of direction, it comes in two forms. And it's strange, but it's almost always come in two forms for me. I get a sense of action or the next right thing, or I get a sense of what to know. Know this, know that. So there's no action to do, but there's just something for me to know in this situation. So that's often when I hear or what comes to me, and I will keep going back to my heart. If my heart gives me one thing, I'll go back. Heart that longs for request, is there anything else I can do for you? And it might have more and more. Sometimes I've had 7 different things that my heart asked me to do in one situation. I think that was my record. Doesn't have to be obviously that many, but I find I just keep praying, if you will, or just keep, if you don't want to use the word praying, attuning to the living energy of the need and seeing what wisdom it has for us. And then the 7th step acknowledges our will, that even if I sense that, ooh, the spirit is guiding me in this direction, I have choice. I might say, I'm not ready to commit to doing that tonight. I'm just not ready. I'm going to wait. Or I can say, yes, I can commit. And that's all it really is. Are you ready to make a commit to act in these directions? And then I find it's very helpful to have a scribe, someone who's with me, who can jot a few keynotes down so I can remember the wisdom, or I become my own scribe and write a few keynotes down. So that's the flow of the 7 steps. I find it's really helped by a coach. I've been using it for more than 10 years, and I still really benefit by having a coach, even if it's just a silent, mostly silent presence, occasionally with a prompt. The 7 steps help me make these key distinctions, like the distinctions between thoughts and observations, between observations and feelings. They help me move to the center. I think there's a reason why needs is the center step. I believe, like I said, it's the center perhaps of our inner life, the desires of our heart. So I think this almost moves down. One, two, three, four moves us down to needs and into physical sensations and into prayer. And then it moves us out again into choice and action. So that's what I got. Let's just see if there's another slide here. We'll hold off on the practice for journaling. I'll stop the share, and I just want to, maybe there's comments or questions. Yeah, we got time. So I gave a lot of words right then. I wanted to plow through it. I wanted to give you a sense of the 7 steps, a sense of the 3 sources. But maybe we'll all take a breath and it just open it up for maybe 5 minutes. If there's any, just 1, 2, or 3 of you, if you have a comment or a question on this very brief, succinct introduction to these 7 steps of clarity, you can simply unmute and speak. Or if you want to, you could raise your hand. Yes, Al, and then
So
Lundetta.
I'm just looking at the feelings and the physical sensations and thinking about in NVC framing, those feelings can be identified through physical sensations. And so I'm looking to understand that distinction a little bit more, because I'm kind of seeing them as the same thing. So is there something I'm missing there?
Yeah, well, let's take, for example, the need for respect that I work for. If I'm not experiencing respect, I'll go right back to you. How might you feel if you're not feeling respect in the moment? How might you feel?
Activated, agitated, concerned.
Great. So you're activated, you're agitated, and if you can play along,
Mhm.
you're activated, you're agitated, and you're concerned. What's going on in your body that lets you
Mhm.
know you're having those 3 feelings?
Yeah, in that kind of situation, I'm thinking of the situation where that most comes up. Then I feel an increased energy. My heart rate's going to go up. There's a heat in my body. There's
Yeah.
my brain starts firing off, maybe with anger or frustration. Yeah, but then it's those physical sensations then that are tuning me to the feelings that are then leading me to see the needs, right?
Yes. Yes. So, and I think you named some clear physical sensations. My heart rate increased. I felt warmth. And I might then ask, where in your body are you feeling warm? And you might, maybe it's your chest with your increased heart. So warm in certain areas of the body, that's a physical sensation. Heart rate racing. There's many physical sensations, but there's at least 3 simple ones to first start with to get me thinking about it. Temperature is one, which you named. Am I more warm or more cold? And where? Where in my body am I feeling warmth and cold? Um, Constriction and expansion is another. Am I feeling tightness, constriction, or looseness, expansion? That's another area of physical sensation. And then the movement of energy. Am I feeling tingling somewhere? Energy moving up, energy moving down, the heart rate. So those are just 3 little ways of looking at physical sensations. So I think all feeling as a big, it's helpful once we name a feeling word like anger. We then ask ourselves, well, what's going on in your body that tells you you're angry? Yes.
Yeah. So, yeah.
So I would use words like angry, sad, frustrated, concerned, agitated. I would all call them feeling words.
And Stephen Michael, you're doing this circular. It's like once you are stepping into like seeing what your body sensations are, you might actually go back to feelings, and maybe there's some other words to put onto feelings that you notice when you're being in touch with your body.
Yes. And the other thing I want to emphasize is the key thing about this 5th step, physical sensations, is ultimately it connects us to the physical sensations related to the need in its fullness. So a lot of the physical sensations that we explored were the physical sensations of respect in its lack. But ultimately, we want to get to step 5 with the need in its fullness. And what's it like when the need is experienced in its fullness? That's where we want to land. And that's the energy that we can bring to step 6.
Okay, so then that physical sensations connects to the beauty of the needs.
Exactly.
So it's like circling back to check in with the beauty of the needs.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Great question. We'll certify you tonight, I think. Lundetta.
I saw Jenna had her hand raised. It could have been in response to what's talking now. I can just put mine in the chat. Go.
No, you go first. I'll go after.
Yeah, okay. I'll just make this brief. I just want to thank you both for where you are in this portion of my life. I feel like you guys have been like following me and noticing like she needs this now. So in other words, it seems like everything is coming together, the NVC and, me actually learning about St. Ignatius spirituality from one who's actually here. Shout out to one who told me about this online, program or app that I was able to listen to and get in a 9-month St. Ignatius retreat. But thank you. Thank you. I'm looking forward to this, particularly about the somatic experiencing, which is something I always struggled with. And as we were just talking through the example right now, it's like, ooh, yeah, because I feel that all of this together is really setting up, moving me along this journey because it is a journey. So,
Hmm.
so thank you all. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Lundetta, perhaps it's true. There's a German mystic, Meister Eckhart, who says the universe is a conspiracy organized solely for your benefit. Jenna.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I was just appreciating the conversation, Steve, Al, and Julie, and when you popped in as well, and just experiencing some resonance. And also wanted to share that for me, I have non-apparent disabilities, and a lot of that comes through physical sensations. And so, mixed with childhood experiences, sometimes it's actually way easier to access the body sensations first and then trace back to the feelings as a result of that. And it's been actually a benefit in like a therapeutic setting. I'm able to figure out my feelings from physically how I'm doing. So they're definitely interconnected. And I appreciated both the linear nature, but also the cyclical and like fluidity around it as well. So that's all.
Right.
Thanks.
Thank you. And I just want to underline what you're saying for everyone, that you could start on step 5. You could start right at physical sensation. That could be your starting place. All right. So if there's no more questions or comments, then we'll go to a little activity. Okay. So Julie, if you could put the activity in the chat so you have it. You could also just write 4 words down. So I emailed the sheet. If you have it, you could print it or you could type on it. Julene just put it in the chat. But if it's simple for you and you just got a pen and paper, you could just write 4 words down on a piece of paper. And those 4 words are the first 3 steps. You could write thoughts, observations, feelings, and needs. So that's all you'll need for this activity is a piece of paper, thoughts, observations, feelings, and needs with some space in between them. Thank you, Julie. And then I'll put the slideshow back up, and I'll explain the activity. There we go. All right. So the first thing I want to invite you to do is, if you're willing, if you're not willing to do the activity, you don't have to, but it's really simple. We're not going to go breakout rooms, and we're not going to move, unfortunately, with just an hour. I've translated the tool can also be something I call the inner life map. So, but we're not going to use the whole inner life map. We're only going to use the first 4 steps, just for simplicity's sake. So we're going to play a little bit with this inner life map. If you've studied nonviolent communication, this will be very familiar to you. But first thing I'm inviting you to do is bring to mind a situation, maybe something going on in your life this week. Doesn't have to be the biggest situation with the biggest feelings in the world, but anything that has a feeling. Could be a positive feeling, something you feel a positive way about. Could be a negative feeling. Could be something happening very close to home. It could be something happening in society that you're aware of and you're having a feeling reaction. So just bring to mind a situation that has a feeling. And I'm going to suggest, but you don't have to, I'm going to suggest for the purpose of this activity, you first write down 1 or 2 observable facts about the situation. Then number 2, write your thoughts and judgments about the situation. Then number 3, write how you feel about the situation. Then number 4, notice what your needs are and write down your needs. So that's the first 4 steps to just to take a situation and then from there float with it a little bit. Just attune to your experience. Notice what you notice. If you're noticing a feeling, write down another feeling word. If you're noticing a thought, write down a thought. So there's where you allow your pen to do the dancing or your pencil or your typing. You just kind of move a little up, a little down, and you're not in a rush. You're just being with the thought. Oh, that's a thought. And when you put something in thought, just let it be a thought. Notice, oh, that's what I'm thinking. It's not necessarily a fact. When you write down your feeling, oh, notice I'm feeling that and feel the feeling. Take a moment and feel the feeling. And when you get to the need, then notice the need. And if you can, tap into the beauty of the need, the goodness of the need in its fullness, not in its lack, like I did with respect. And then see where that leads you. And you could just, so number 5 says, just keep attuning to your inner life. Note any other thoughts, feelings, and needs and observations as they arise. So we'll just take 5 minutes to do this with our pen. But I invite you eventually, if it can settle somewhere, because we're a limited time, if it can just settle in one place, maybe with 1 or 2 core needs that come out, just try to see if it wants to take you to 1, 2, or 3 core needs that are alive in the situation. And then just do your best to maybe tap into one of them and the goodness of the need, the beauty of the need, what it's like when that need is really fulfilled, even if you have to go back to a memory or use your imagination. But tap into the living energy of that need, what it's like when that need is really fulfilled. And then just maybe let the exercise settle for a couple of minutes there. So we'll take about 5 or so minutes and I'll check in with you.